Welcome, everybody, to Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker, back at you with another interactive class out of the secret library of the Connected Universe. I have a wonderful show up for you this evening, kind of piggybacking, admittedly, off a little bit of the recent Ancient Aliens episode I was just on this past Friday, which highlighted a lot of UFO activity over the 37th parallel. But we're not just going to concentrate on that. We're going to be looking at UFO hotspots and really what is powering them. We are going to look at some specific cases in a specific region, and we'll expand outward from there and hit on some of these very interesting and strange and esoteric topics. But first and foremost, of course, for those listening to the podcast version of this later, please join us every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, right here, connecteduniverseportal.com. For those that are members of the Connected Universe Portal, of course, we have a bevy of different things for you within that membership, including the new time travel course that has been posted in the secret library. Of course, you get access to the full Connecting the Universe interactive class, not just we have the public version out there on YouTube. Appreciate all those that have joined us from there, but the members get the after show. And hey, those of you listening to the podcast, come watch the full video presentation of this, because we're going to be showing a lot of images and videos. One particular video. The after show has another one. A lot of images this evening, plus a map, which might be a little hard to see there over those airwaves, but I do appreciate those that are listening to the podcast. Of course, there's sneak peek and behind the scenes videos within the membership, monthly Q&As, exclusive articles, insider travel vlogs to all sorts of locations. We are going to be adding to that this year with the different tours that are coming up. So I'll get to that one. Of course, all of this and more, connecteduniverseportal.com. And members, please go ahead and get the app. And then here is one of those tours that I just mentioned. Stargates of Ancient Egypt, April 16th to the 28th, 2024. Yes, we're getting down to the wire here. You can still jump on this last minute if you want, but we are getting down to the wire here, just over a month left. So, hey, if you've got it's not quite $5,000 to throw at that right now, I get a tax return or something, you want to join us, do it. But we are getting down to the wire on that. And hey, it does cost a lot less than some of those other ones that are 7, 8, 9. I've seen them 10 or 12 grand. This one's pretty affordable. And I'm going to be announcing some other tours here very soon, so stay tuned for that. Those that saw my post yesterday on upcoming events, you may have seen me slide that one into there without making any announcements yet, because I don't have all the formal material yet. So be on the lookout for that announcement here very, very soon. All right, I see that Jen is in the house. Sam Blue is with us as well. Wonderful to see people joining the chat. All right, so let's go ahead and start getting into all of this. Jason Thompson is in the house as well from Atlanta. Hey, Jason, I just made that announcement. It'll be down your way, Atlanta, Georgia, for Haunt Atlanta there in September. Okay, so when we are talking UFO hotspots, we have to take a look at hotspots around the world in general. What in the world is that? What are we talking about here? Well, these are locations around the world in which we've recognized that there's a lot of strange and interesting activity happening in these areas. Of course, we're talking UFOs tonight, but it could be supernatural activity. It could be people witnessing something paranormal in nature more frequently there. It could be Bigfoot, Sasquatch, other types of cryptids. For those cryptozoologists out there, we could be talking about a significant number of missing persons, all these different sorts of things. Now, a lot of my research has been generated in the Triangle area, specifically, of course, the Alaska Triangle, but it's not just relegated to that. And we have covered before in the past Ivan T. Sanderson's vile vortices. Not really getting into the vile vortices this evening, although my upcoming book, I will be. So, because it is all related. So when we're talking about these energetic hotspots like this, and we have to ask the question eventually, why are these beings and entities and all these things so attracted to these areas? And we will definitely dive into that question. But the first thing that we have to look at is, what exactly are these energetic areas? Is this just a bunch of BS? Is this a bunch of woo-woo that the metaphysical community has come up with and said, oh, the land here is so powerful and energetic? No, it's not that. There is real science behind this. And yes, you can feel it when you go to these areas. It's not just a mystical woo-woo sort of thing when you go there. Like, we just went out to Sedona, and yes, it's beautiful and majestic, and you are awestruck. All of those things happen to you, but you can feel that energy there as well. And when we were on one of the hiking trails, there's a kind of convergence at this one particular area right there around the airport Mesa. And I was watching an indigenous trail guide taking a small group of people up one of the trails, and they were going to climb up the rock formation. And he was pointing out one of the trees that were there and the way that it grew in that spiral pattern. The energy there had an effect on the growth of that particular tree and other, of course, plant life in the area. So what is this? Well, we have to go and examine the Earth's core. So this is where we're starting, the core of the Earth this evening. And basically what is happening here is the core of the Earth is molten iron, and it is spinning around and around and around. And as it is spinning like that, it is creating a magnetic field. Now, this is a wonderful thing that it does for us because it protects us from the solar wind. If we did not have our magnetic shield, then when we go outside, we would absolutely get fried by the sun. And when we have those polar flips, and actually, I think it was last week that Tom McNicholas asked this question about the polar flips and what happens when when the poles flip like that. Now, it hasn't happened for about 42,000 years. In fact, I grabbed the Alaska Triangle book off the shelf from behind me, and we looked it up, what I had written there a few years ago when I covered that. I don't remember all those numbers specifically. There's a lot that stays up here in the noggin. But sometimes I want to get specific on the number, because I'll say it was about 8 to 10% that the magnetic protection went down to. And this is something that they can actually measure with from objects that are that old in nature. And they estimate that the magnetic shield during that pole flip had gotten down to about 6%. And what we notice about 2,000 years ago, there are a lot of people that started living in caves. We see a lot of cave art. So they were going inside during the day to protect themselves from this, very powerful sun. And this was a chunk of time that lasted about 400 years back then. But we see underground locations like Darankuyu and other locations around the world that make sense that people would have built to protect themselves when that flip happened. So, long way to say that the magnetic protection of the Earth is very, very important to us. So as that magnetism is coming forth out of the Earth, and it passed through the Earth's mantle in the Earth's crust, it is interacting with different metals and minerals. And depending on what it interacts with and how much that quantity is, it's going to create a variety of different magnetic fields, some stronger than others. Some are going to have different effects than others. Magnetism passing through iron deposits is going to be different than passing through quartz deposits and things like this. And of course, again, it depends on how much that quantity is. People have talked about there being a massive quartz crystal buried underneath the Bermuda Triangle. Well, it's possible. We have no idea if there is one down there or not, but it's quite possible. Or I've talked about, Skinwalker Ranch in the past. Some people say, well, there's a UFO buried in the mesa. Well, there's something buried in the mesa. They have pulled some exotic metals out of there, but that area in general seems to have some very, very unusual deposits within the ground that magnetism is coming up and making these different strange magnetic fields that a lot of supernatural activity, a lot of UFO sightings. And some of these UFO sightings are not just the simple, it's a craft, crossing over the sky. Some of these seem to be go in and out of existence. So are they passing through to some other dimension somewhere? Well, we're going to be asking some of these questions tonight as we go through this. I see a number of people are down there in the chat. So great to see Cody Lyman in the house. Great to see you, Cody. Came to Ireland there with us a while back. Wayne is here with us tonight. So is Scarlett. There's Tom. Great to see you, Tom. There's Sarah Yusuf as well. All right. So, and yeah, Sarah, we're going to get to this question as we go along. Is there a connection between UFO hotspots and fluctuations in the magnetosphere? So, could be. We're going to take a look at some of that. So, all right. Threw this quote out there on Ancient Aliens some time ago when we did an episode on UFO hotspots. If we're trying to solve a mystery, you want to go to a location that has the most clues. And these are the locations that could have the clues to connect our ancient past to our modern reality and perhaps give us the answers we are seeking. So as UFO phenomena became a more recurring theme in our history back in the 1950s, you had gentlemen like J. Allen Hynek, who were amassing all kinds of information. Now, he was working with Project Blue Book, which came out of Project Grudge and Project Sign. And originally, the job was to debunk a lot of that UFO activity, find a reasonable scientific explanation for what's going on to settle these people down. And as he kept going along, he started noticing there are many of these cases that we cannot explain. To this day, there's still 701 cases that they never solved, that they never debunked at all. They're still outstanding and open to this day. Our current UFO programs, this new generation, they're pretty much ignoring all of those open cases. It seems like to them that UFO activity started around the year 2000, and we're just going to ignore everything from the 20th century and before that. But no, there's quite a history back there. And of course, one of the things that he did, compiling all this information, he broke it down by years and the types of occupations of people that were reporting this. One of the books right back here, right at the top of that stack underneath that candle, is the Hynek UFO report. And basically, I took a snapshot of this map out of there, which kind of was breaking down state by state a number of these different cases. And so essentially, this was like the early days of coming up with determining what these hotspots are and where they are. Jacques Vallée also did a similar thing, and he took it to an even bigger level with the databases that he was putting together. So, Jacques Vallée, we know him in many circles for being, one of those forefathers of ufology. But he's also a computer scientist and engineer. He worked on the original internet. We are able to do this today because of Jacques Vallée. And he ended up working with Bigelow to create an even more massive databases. They were researching a lot of these cases. So once you have all of this data, then you start using some filters and some artificial intelligence behind it to try to narrow down where a lot of these different what we're calling hotspots are. Where are these the most cases happening at? And so you had other people that were out there in the field, like this past Friday, we did the UFO Superhighway, which was really based on Chuck Zukowski's work on the 37th parallel and how he had noticed that you could basically, many of his cases that he had been investigating, there were a lot of cattle mutilation cases in it, but a lot of UFO cases as well. And he had his television show there for a season, Alien Highway, that many of them were following this line across the country, which was the 37th parallel that runs through the United States. Well, there are many parallels that run through the United States. And this one here is out of Popular Science. And they were kind of trying to debunk the whole 37th parallel. So they threw up there, they basically took 3 parallels north and 3 parallels south, 40th and 34th, to say, hey, there's a lot of activity going on these as well. Actually, it seems to me they kind of, in many ways, cherry picked the whole, well, we'll go 3 up and 3 down. If you go, not the 34th, but the 33rd, right below that, 33rd parallel has a lot going on with it. We're talking Phoenix Lights are along the 33rd parallel. We're talking Roswell is along the 33rd parallel. We're talking Disney's Club 33 is on the 33rd parallel. And that's not a joke. That is not a joke at all. It's named for being on the 33rd parallel. It's an exclusive club, invitation only. It's one of those, well, now it's almost become one of those wild stories about, all the influential people in America coming together, one of those secret society sort of things. It is an exclusive club, but it is, again, right there on the 33rd parallel. So there are these areas around the world that just seem to line up and link up like this. And so, again, kind of going back to the idea of the way that the energy works along the earth. Well, of course, we naturally have to talk about ley lines. Are these parallels working like ley lines? Well, okay, what's a ley line? A ley line is the geographic lining up of different sites, different could be whatever you're trying to line up, but specifically when it comes to this, geographic locations around the world, ancient sites of power, temples, monasteries, these type of power points like this that the ancients knew to build their temples on because of the energetic properties in the ground. And so it was Alfred Watkins in the 1920s, about 100 years ago, that had noticed, just basically walking along through England, that, hey, a lot of these locations are actually lining up. Why are they lining up? And they were lining up because of that energetic power. That is why they originally built on there. Now, the modern people attending these places had no idea. So, Watkins notices, oh, that's interesting. And then people started researching as to why they actually did that. So there are energetic currents running through the earth. They're actually known as telluric currents, and that is the Earth's energy grid. Now, again, when we're talking about this magnetism coming out of the earth, it's not perfectly fluid, if I can use that term. In other words, the energy is pulsating and pulsating and pulsating. There might be longer pulses and shorter pulses and more powerful ones and not as powerful ones and that sort of thing, which is why sometimes, we'll have, a wonderful, huge, big event occur and then other ones, not so much. Kind of like, conversely with the solar wind, when that hits us, sometimes we'll get a a stronger wave of that, and sometimes not. It depends on how strong that pulsates out of the sun and hits us. Well, same thing coming up out of the earth. So now this has seemed to be very, very attractive for UFOs. Let me see what you guys have any comments or questions in at so far here. And Mr. Cumin, many hotspots in human cemeteries as well. Yeah, some different cemeteries do line up on these as well. And Tom asks, if you were able to visit any hotspot without restrictions, where would you visit first? Probably Area 51. Let's see what's down there. Let's see what's really down there. But they'd probably hide everything anyway before you got there, because they would want to know you're coming. Oh, yes, you can come. Give us like a month's notice, then we'll go hide everything, right? And Psychophia, interesting topic. Reminds me hollow earth entrances scattered throughout the earth. Yeah, and so what's interesting about that, we talked a little bit about this last week. There are those old lava tubes, magma chambers, these sorts of things in which different entities could hide, whether they are extraterrestrial. If they're extraterrestrials, they would have to have come from somewhere else in the cosmos, landed here, and then decided to go hide in there. They could be civilizations that have been with us all along. They could be something that's interdimensional. There are a lot of different things that could be down there in these locations. And plus, of course, our government loves to dig tunnels in secret places all over the country, well, world. And I just posted on my social media the other day about this massive, it was like $3 or $4 billion for throwing into this massive tunnel network. Or I guess it's like one long tunnel for these neutrino experiments that they're going to be doing that runs from South Dakota to Chicago, 800 miles. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. All right. So let's start getting into some of these. Now, I'm going to look at a cluster in the Midwest here. Okay. And I don't know how well you can see the map here and those red dots. This basically is from Western Kentucky through the very, very eastern part of Oklahoma. This is generally around that 37th parallel area. Chuck Zukowski did cover a few of these. Now, the book 37th Parallel, he didn't actually write, but of course he was consulted, interviewed, and all that sort of thing. The author, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, basically followed him around on a lot of these different cases. So these are some of those, and there are some extras in here as well. But it kind of just shows that, yeah, there are these hotspots, and we're going to look at, okay, what is the energy? So we're going to start here with what is known as the Mantell plane crash. One of the photos did not load up. That always drives me nuts. Do all this preparation work to get all of these photos loaded up, and sometimes it just disappears on me. I don't understand why that is, but here's the photo I want to start with this story. Oh, I see. It's actually in the middle. It just got misplaced somehow. In any case, this happened in 1948 and is really considered the first crash associated with chasing a UFO. So he was a Kentucky Air National Guard pilot, Captain Thomas F. Mantell. We did cover this very, very briefly on that episode on Friday. He and his squadron flying P-51 Mustangs. Beautiful day. They're out on a training mission out of Marietta, Georgia, heading to Louisville. And all of a sudden, as they are on their way, the tower at Godman Field in Fort Knox asked them to divert to investigate an object that had been seen over their airfield. And then what happened after that, there's a mix of different reports. There's conflicting reports as to what actually happened here. But what we can gather is that the object was teardrop or ice cream cone in shape with red lights. It was very large, about 250 to 350 feet, or 250 to 300 feet in diameter, very high in the sky. The pilots approached the craft and were unsure of how many there were. Again, the report is kind of muddled. So some say 3, some say 4. There's actually some reports that say 5, and there was only 4 planes. But we do know that one was supposed to have gone on to Louisville to complete the mission. So Mantell kept chasing it. Some planes had to refuel. There's like this really kind of crazy mix of a story. Mantell ended up being the last one to keep going up after this thing. And this is what ended up happening to him, unfortunately. Not exactly sure of what happened in the air, but he kept climbing in altitude. Could have run out of fuel, could have been ill-equipped for the oxygen. We don't know. His wingman, Clements, said that Mantell disappeared at about 25,000 feet. Still see the object. And then all we know is that he ended up crashing the plane. So it's the first crash that is associated with a UFO. Later on, the military chalked this up to that he was chasing a secret balloon. So it kind of smacks of Roswell. Kind of sounds like this. That, oh, it's another mistaken balloon. Now, okay, this is the Roswell photo. And that's Major Jesse Marcel. He maintained the whole time that it was strange debris. Now, he reluctantly posed with this foil that they said was actually what he saw. But originally, he's talking about there being strange debris, and his grandchildren have come forth with a journal that is very, very cryptic, and you can tell something happened to him around that time because his handwriting almost completely changed. It was very, very different. So something happened to him there. With Mantell, and here's the thing. They're trying to tell us that these highly trained military personnel aren't able to deduce what a balloon is. Now, with Marcel at Roswell, okay, there was him, and there were a couple of locals in the area that reported this, and the locals seemed to kind of keep building the story, where Marcel was just adamant, there is some strange debris out here in the field. And then all of a sudden it's foil. I think he can tell the difference between a little bit of foil from a balloon and other objects. Same thing with this incident in Kentucky. You're talking not just Mantell, but you're also talking the other pilots. You're talking the people at air traffic control, these other air personnel that are there at air traffic control at Fort Knox that are saying, we have something strange in the sky here. We want you to go take a look. So all of them don't realize that it's a balloon. They're not calling up, trying to figure out what's going on. The officers in charge of both sides, you'd have to have commanding officers there at Fort Knox telling the air traffic controllers, hey, have these guys go check out what it is. Not to mention the commanding officers, the officers in charge of the training mission that would have to sign off on, yes, you can be diverted to go check that. There's a lot of people in the mix here. There's a lot of people in the mix. And you're going to say, oh, yeah, they just mistook a balloon. All of these people mistook that? It just doesn't seem right to me. All right. So that is our dot all the way here on the right. So now if you go over kind of in the middle and I don't know how well you guys can see that. There was actually an incident that preceded that. It actually preceded Roswell. There's a number of events that actually preceded Roswell. But we're going to be talking about Cape Girardeau. What's interesting about this, so again, about 6 years before the Roswell crash, it's July 1941, Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Reverend William Huffman of the Red Star Baptist Church was summoned to the site of an accident by local law enforcement in order to read the last rites over the victims of a crash. He was shocked when he discovered this was not an ordinary vehicular crash, but what he was praying over were three small gray beings, unlike anything he had ever seen before. Two were dead and the third was dying. The military was beginning to take over the scene as he conducted the last rites, and they confiscated all the crash material and the bodies. So again, more military involvement. This is the pastor of a church. The police were out there. They're like, hey, we have dying beings. Can somebody... I don't know if we would really do that so much today. Our culture has really, really changed. But, you're talking a very rural area. The local police are saying, hey, we have somebody dying here. Can you read some last rites? And there he was and could not believe what he was looking at. And yeah, of course, the military took everything away. So when we hear reports of, like last year at the UAP hearings, one of the big pieces of news that came out, and it came out just a few weeks before that, and they brought David Grush on to talk about the UFO crash material that we are supposed to have. Again, for those that have been following along for decades, it isn't news to us. It's very nice it was able to be read into the record and that we're able to have a more public discussion about it. That is wonderful. But it's not news. And there's another one there in which crashed material was supposed to have been retrieved by the military. So yeah, that's kind of right there in the middle, in the lower third there. So if we pop back over to the right, however, I kind of skipped over this one, but I wanted to, because there was relation there with the retrieval of crash material. That's why I kind of did it out of order here. So Hopkinsville, Kentucky. This was actually featured, the fictional show Project Blue Book. This was featured on that show in a way. Of course, this is a Project Blue Book case. It's controversial. Some do, of course, believe it was a hoax. We don't really know. August 21st, 1955. And I have been to Hopkinsville, and I had no idea at the time because I was just a kid. But my aunt and uncle used to live there. They had a farm, and we'd gone down there one time. I remember feeding the animals, and it was kind of, again, a rural town kind of out there. So just kind of read through this, a little bit of a summary here. I won't hit this too hard, but on the evening of Sunday, August 21st, 1955, Elmer Lucky Sutton, a young man in his early 20s, was visiting his mom, Glennie Langford, and three younger half-siblings at the farmhouse he'd grown up in, 8 miles north of Hopkinsville. On break from his job with a traveling carnival, Lucky and his wife Vera and their friends Billy Ray and June Taylor were with him for the weekend. His brother JC and sister-in-law Aileen, plus a family friend Opie, were also there that night. Party of 11 playing cards. There was a lot of people here. They had like the big family party going on. All these people over and were playing cards. But the whole incident that evening started with Billy Ray claiming he'd seen a rainbow-colored object with streaks trailing behind it. He was generally laughed at by the others, but Billy Ray convinced Lucky to go outside with him to have a look around. So if you can see the caption there, Lucky is the one holding the rifle, and the other guy is Billy Ray Taylor. So Billy Ray is the one who first saw these lights. So they went out there to have a look around, didn't see much at first, but suddenly there was a glowing object approaching from the woods. As it got closer, they realized it was a short human-like creature with large eyes, 2 legs that seemed to float rather than walk, with 2 arms raised as if in surrender. Lucky yelled an expletive, and the 2 men ran inside, slamming the door behind them. They then started shooting at the being from the house, and more of these beings showed up. There's a lot more to the story. Neighbors heard the gunshots. It was pretty much bedlam out there. And the whole family goes down there to the police station and reports this. And this ends up becoming headline news about this. So some people, of course, believe that this was a hoax, that they set the whole thing up and that they were looking for attention. But it seems kind of crazy because there's like 7 kids that were there too, that we're going to shoot up the place with the kids there and everything, to make the news. It was pretty crazy. So, Sarah, the Kentucky Goblins and Hellier is kind of the other side of the state, but it would be still along that same strip if you continue to draw that line across. So still really along that same strip. And Tom, like the movie Signs, I think, and I might be mistaken, Signs might be based off of that. But yeah, it is kind of similar. And that's a good question, Tom. So wouldn't there be a higher EMF field around a crash site? So, well, certainly at the time of the crash, the problem with that is, the military always seems to get out there and scoop a lot of that up. Now, people have gone out there to some of these alleged crash sites. I know when Jen and I were out there at Roswell in it was last April, that had a couple of buddies around the area. Ben Hansen was out there along with Brittany Barbieri, and there were a couple of others, and they were out there near the alleged site doing an archaeological dig. So some people they'll take the equipment out there and try to see if there's anything still significant about the area. So now an overarching electromagnetic field in the area, you can do that. You can do a complete magnetic survey. And that's things like the U.S. Department of the Interior will do and what have you. And you can actually find those documents. So I've talked repeatedly in the past about the Alaska Triangle and how in 1965, U.S. Department of the Interior survey 100,000 square miles, and they categorized 5 different magnetic characters, many of which that they determined were magnetic or negative anomalies that were up there. So yeah, this is energy that's palpable. And you can go out to take a magnetometer and these sorts of things out there and try to pinpoint all of that. Absolutely. So, all right, let's hit, we have next on the list, Piedmont. So as you continue, okay, we'll go back along we're working right to left here. So you had Fort Knox, Hopkinsville, Cape Girardeau. Then you have Piedmont. We also covered this one on the show. Again, very, very briefly. The television show, we kind of blew through all of these cases they covered them in like 5 minutes. Boom, boom, boom. On the interview itself, there was a lot more detail. And of course, they're interviewing a bunch of us too. So they end up figuring out the way they want to do their storytelling, and they just kind of showed, okay, there's stuff going on, and then went out west and did cattle mutilations for a while. In any case, we're not doing cattle mutilations tonight, but Piedmont, here we go. So this was time frame February to April 1973, and the surrounding area suffered a rash of UFO and UAP sightings. The first of these sightings was witnessed by the coach and several members of a local high school basketball team. As they were driving, they saw flashing lights in the sky about 50 feet off the ground, about 4 or 5 feet apart. They watched these flash red, green, amber, and white for about 5 or 10 minutes until the object moved off. Strange lights were seen by others in the area for quite some time, with a number of these being either around or even in the waters of Clearwater Lake. Just last year, Governor Mike Parsons signed legislation declaring Piedmont and the surrounding area the UFO capital of Missouri. So That's a part of Missouri state legislation now, that Piedmont and that area around it. It's Missouri's UFO capital. Who knew? But yeah, they had several sightings over there for many months during that time. Now, if you look at this map, not too far off the beaten path, as you keep moving west a little bit, if you can read that small type, it says Mike's UFO incident. It was on I-44 there as I was heading west toward Oklahoma. And it wasn't really anything significant, but I'm driving down the highway. It's at night. And all of a sudden I notice in the sky out to my left, there are these two lights. They're kind of tall, and they're in the sky, and they're just kind of running parallel to the highway, and they're almost kind of pacing me. And I'm like looking up, looking at the road, looking up, looking at the road. What the heck is that in the sky? Just going along. And then all of a sudden, took off. I was like, whoa, okay, I think I just saw a UFO. It was all of about a minute, really. Yeah, and nothing else happened besides that. Now, what's interesting, so when I was asked to partake in that show, we're going to talk about these different cases. Okay, I'm going to do some research, because I've heard about many of these cases, but I didn't know all those like details that they're going to ask you about. So okay, let's get into it. We'll start asking the details. And so it was covering the 37th parallel and Chuck Zukowski's work. Okay, I'm going to watch his show, Alien Highway. My friend Heather Taddy was on that. And so, going to watch it. And when they did cover Piedmont, and one of the ladies on that show basically described the same thing. These two vertical red lights in the sky that just, were moving like that. And then they took off. And it's like, wow. I'd never seen that before. I had no idea none of that. But there it is, my exact same interaction. Well, I didn't really interact with it. My exact same observation was right there that she had seen back in the 70s. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then all the way to the west there, you'll see that area just to the west of Joplin, Missouri. It's actually just over the border in Oklahoma. And you have there what they call the spook lights. And so there's a lot of different explanations people try to give those type of lights, swamp gas or ball lightning and stuff like that. But these are lights that they've been seeing there in that area for 100 years, and nobody's been able to figure out exactly what they are. But again, something else that is right along that line. So I see Earth Cat is in the house. Great to see you down there, Earth Cat. And let's see, Tom, during the 80s, there's a few crop circles reported in Ohio, and went and visited one. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. So problem with crop circles is there are people who do go out there and fake it. And you can tell because of the way that usually it's like with weed or something like that. You can tell the way that the stalks are broken. There are ones that are, I almost want to say perfect. Freddie Silva's done a lot of work on that, so I'd kind of point you off in his direction for that. But there's a way to tell the difference between like a real crop circle and one that's been manufactured. And unfortunately, because there's so many manufactured ones that have come out, it's really hard to it's like the same with any of this. Once people start hoaxing things and faking things, it discredits almost everything, even though there are legitimate ones that are out there. Okay. In the middle of this map, you see a bigger cluster of red dots. And so we're going to get into these here. We've got about 15 minutes to hit this. So we're going to start with year 2000 January 5th sightings, which really followed a path from Lebanon, or actually started in Highland down to Lebanon, to Shiloh, to Mildstadt, just all these different little towns there in Illinois, just to the east of St. Louis. And what was fascinating about this, yes, the initial report was by a local business owner, Melvin Knoll. He described this thing as triangular in shape, had several decks. There were red lights underneath, about the size of a football field. This photo that I have on the screen is just an artist's interpretation of a triangular UFO object. And we hear reports of a lot of these different triangle UFOs. However, many of the reports on this thing came from police officers. So Lebanon police officer Ed Barton said he saw a very bright light that kept changing colors. Shiloh police officer David Martin said he saw something in the sky, but not sure what it was. Mildstadt police officer Craig Stevens said it was a huge object, kind of V-shaped. Now, because Scott Air Force Base is not too far off the beaten path there, it's pretty much right in the area, they were contacted by these different law enforcement agencies, but they denied that they had anything in the sky at all that night. Sure, they could have been lying. But the fact that you have an incident here where several police officers are involved is not just... One of the unfortunate things about this field is that a lot of the civilian reports, right now, Arrow, right, this new reporting agency from the government, is not taking civilian reportings. You still have to go to MUFON and report these things. They won't take it, and that's because there are a lot of people, a lot of the on the civilian side. I mean, yes, it can happen with the government side too, but people don't want to lose their security clearances and jobs, so they generally don't. On the civilian side, unfortunately, you have a lot of people that are looking for attention and notoriety and these sorts of things, and will hoax or fake things. And so a lot of times people just won't even accept these type of reports. But the fact that you had a lot of police officers that were confirming what they were seeing in the sky gives it a lot of credibility. So you notice there on the map that I had several other red dots here. Well, you know, what is right there? Right there is one of our ancient sites of power, Cahokia. The Cahokia mounds there. It's, you know what? I'm going to let myself talk about this. I have a clip here from the Shadow Dimension. These are our ancient mounds. It's actually a pyramid. So it's myself, Johnny Enoch is in this, and our late friend, Coyote Chris Sutton. Behind me is Monk's Mound, part of the Cahokia complex, which is right here along the Mississippi River, right down the road from Alton, where we're going to be investigating Mineral Springs. Now, this dates all the way back to about 900 AD, and in 1250 AD, around that time, there was actually more of a population around here than in London, England. Now, the mound itself was part of a temple complex, and there was actually a structure that had been on top of there. And again, when we go back into those ancient cultures, they would build structures like this in order to harness that earth energy. And this happens to be the largest pyramid north of Mesoamerica.
When we look in the ancient world and how they built their temples, and we're talking about pyramids here, we're talking about obelisks. These places and how they built them and where they put things was no accident. They were tapping directly into these energy fields and circuits on the earth.
There are some wonderful vortices out at Cahokia. You gotta be patient and feel for them, but they're there. And again, that's why he picked the place. It's because the energy was so good. And settlers came through here, those guys were long gone. And so we really don't know exactly what happened up there. I worked in archaeology for a few years and in a suburb of Cahokia, and we know where they were, we knew kind of what they did, we knew what they ate, how they carried their food, that kind of stuff. We don't know exactly how they did ceremony. Yeah, you go up there on top there, and it's kind of you kind of feel that exhilaration, like something's on there. But again, those people, they have almost 20,000 people at one time doing their thing, and so that leaves an imprint.
Not only does it make it easier to travel between dimensions, but I believe this is one of the key fundamental principles of how they powered up stargates on this earth. I believe that what we are seeing with these ancient consciousness technologies and transmitters or transmuters of energy that were tapping into these energy fields on the earth, they were essential pathways. They were highways. There's these areas of the earth that were very important to this, a grid, you could say, and they were sort of plugging into it.
All right. Yeah. I do miss him, Tom, Coyote Chris. He was such a wonderful guy. So I will have another clip from him in the after show. That's going to be the after show treat for this evening. Is a little bit more from Coyote Chris, and also Tom with a $20 super chat superstar, Tom McNicholas. Absolutely appreciate that. He says, a few dollars to help you find the king's fortune in Egypt. Then I expect to be repaid with interest. Well, if we do happen to discover a lost ancient treasure and they give us a finder's fee for that, then I will note that you had thrown down there some good luck, a little investment into that. So do appreciate that, my friend. And yes, of course. Yeah. So when we look at areas like Cahokia, there is a reason why they built that there, and there have been some recent surveys in the area in which they are discovering that underneath this mound, this is an earth. They have classified this as an earthwork, but recent surveys show that this earth may be on top of a stone structure. So something underneath the ground there. There is something original to this. And we've seen all through, especially through like South America, those pyramids and temples that got lost in the jungle. It's all kinds of dirt piled up on it. You look at a difference from photos from today, from photos from 100, 120 years ago when they went out there in the jungle and saw these things, and there's a mound and there's a little thing poking out the top. They peel it all away, and there's so much more. Even when you look at old photos of the Sphinx, well, the head is just popping out, and there is so much more underneath. So could very well be that what we see there at Cahokia is just the top side of something much bigger that is underneath, or much more important that's underneath. So they were tapping into this location. There's certainly an energy there when you go to this site, and this is not the only mound there. There are more mounds that are around there, but this is the big one. It's like I said there, it's the largest pyramid north of Mesoamerica, and then you're right along the Mississippi River there. Of course, right up the road is Alton. That's Mineral Springs Hotel, which Alton's considered one of the, or if not the most haunted small town in America. So when we go back and we look at our map here, not that map, this map, that's another one of those red dots that I put on there was Alton. So you have these energies that are right there in that area. Another thing that helps with this, the limestone bluffs. It's magnificent limestone bluffs that are right there interacting with the water. So these are, when we talk about the energy out in Egypt, we always talk about the limestone, the granite, and then of course you have the Nile River. We've got two of the three right there. You have the limestone, you have the water. The only thing you're missing is the granite. And some of those buildings through there, granite was brought in to help with some of that construction. Most of the buildings are made of the limestone from the area. They have the magnificent limestone quarry that's back there that a lot of the buildings were constructed with, but some people brought in granite and things like that. With Mineral Springs Hotel, they drilled a spring right into the ground there. They're trying to find fresh water to build an ice house because they were meat packers. They actually hit a mineral spring, and this was A little over 100 years ago, mineral water was all the big craze. People were drinking it, bathing in it, all that sort of thing. They built a hotel on top of it right there by the water. But also, right up the road, like a mile and a half, 2 miles, not that far, you have the Piasaw Caves. So these are ancient caves that were used by the indigenous people of the area, did get used by the meat packers as well to keep things cool before they built their ice houses. But then, of course, you notice the Piasaw bird that is right there on the side of the cliff. And so this is one of those ancient legendary cryptids, for lack of a better term, from the indigenous tribes of that area. So, was this their interpretation of strange things that they were seeing in the sky? And what they were seeing in the sky there along this route in this hotspot area of energy, was that their interpretation of what was going on there? I've talked many times before with the going back to the Alaska Triangle again, when we talked about the missing airplanes that are up there, and many of those airplanes get attributed to the significant UFO activity that is up there as well. Were some of those airplanes abducted? Possibly. Did some of those airplanes pass through portals into other dimensions or into other points in time? And if so, into other points in time, if they went back in time, then what would the indigenous people of the area think of these things that they saw in the sky? They would have no context whatsoever of an airplane. They would attribute it to some other winged creature. Thunderbirds immediately come to mind. There are Thunderbird legends around this area as well in the Midwest. But could that also be part of the Piasaw bird as well, where they different variations, different airplanes go missing? Do they end up becoming some of these different winged creatures in the legends and lore? It's certainly possible. So we're getting down to the wire here, wrapping up. Jason had asked about cattle mutilations. Yeah, that was something that's a little bit more in the American Southwest. It's not that it doesn't happen in the Midwest or the East, but we see it a lot more in the American Southwest. And what's bizarre about those is the surgical precision with which the animals have been cut. Absolutely bizarre how they might take a piece around the eye or around the jaw or off the backside or whatever, and it's plainly cut off of there. So what is going on here? And if it's trespassers, why? It's just bizarre. It's just absolutely bizarre. The one that they showed on the show, the Miller Ranch, that particular one, not only was it strangely cut like that, but it looked like it had been dropped out of the sky and landed. So I guess people with that imagery think of, okay, it was sucked up into the ship, they cut parts off of it for whatever reason and just dropped it back on the ground. It's kind of the imagery you get out of it. Sarah, maybe aliens like barbecue cute. So Scarlett asks, this is a good question. Are some portals temporary? Do you think they can relocate? Yeah, they're not constantly there. Again, when we talk about the energy emanating out of the earth, that magnetism, it's not a perfect smooth wave. It pulsates, it ebbs and it flows. Great example of this is actually not when we look inward, but when we look outward towards space, and when we have the solar flares that bounce off the ionosphere. Well, there's a point there out in space. NASA has called these X points, but they've admitted these X points are actually portals. And what these are they're portals, and they are opening and closing at different rates of speed, at different sizes. They've sent satellites up there to study this, and they can't find a pattern as to, you know, why they open up as often as they do, or as big or as small as they do. It's almost seemingly random. And of course, as humans, we're trying to figure out, okay, what's the pattern? But there doesn't really seem to be a pattern. And that's what has made our area of research, when we take those same concepts here on Earth, that's something that has made our research so difficult, because using the scientific method, you have to repeatedly perform the same test again and again and again and again to acquire your data, and then, you know, you're going to start with a hypothesis, you know, run all your tests again and again and again in a repeatable process, collect all your data, and then form your conclusions from that. And it's like extremely difficult to be able to do that if you can't make that same activity happen consistently. You can't run the same test every single time, because of the fact that what's happening doesn't always happen. So, you know, if a portal is, you know, opening randomly and in different places all the time, how do you study it if it's jumping around all the time? You don't even know where it's going to show up next. You're kind of almost guessing half the time. So that makes the research really, really difficult when you go down this road. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up on the public side. I want to thank all of you, those out in YouTube land, for joining us this evening. Those that are listening to the audio podcast version of this later, again, please join us every Wednesday night, 8:00 p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com. There is a public side of this that does run for the first hour, and then in the Connected Universe, we have the after show. Actually, the stream just stays going. We just kick off all the people on YouTube. But we do really appreciate the conversation. So, all right, everyone, have a great evening. And subscribers, you guys stick around. Till next time, time really exists.